Today in the broadcast, greetings from the Unmanned Systems Forces. In Crimea, a Svetlyak-class border patrol ship was hit. In the Kherson region, a Pantsir-S1 air defense system was attacked. Ukrainian ballistic missiles targeting sites in Moscow. According to Firepoint's chief designer, this could happen as early as this summer. At the latest, by the beginning of autumn. The aftermath of the strike on Saint Petersburg, from the destruction of oil tanks to a blow to Putin's ego. Eliminating the occupiers, what President Zelenskyy said about the rate of the Russian army's depletion and the nature of their losses. The start of EU membership talks. Hungary lifted its 17-month veto on Ukraine joining the European Union. What the Magyar Prime Minister said. A dirty past. It's been revealed who ordered the detention of Ukrainian Sberbank cash couriers in Hungary and why. Along with the cash and gold, these stories and more, coming up right now. Hi, I'm Volodymyr Rabchin, and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, give us a like, and let's get to the news. The Unmanned Systems Forces have struck several enemy targets in the temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories. Specifically in Crimea, a Svetlyak-class border patrol ship was hit. A short-range radio navigation system and locomotives were hit. In the Kherson region, a Pantsir-S1 air defense system was attacked. Fuel and lubricant storage tanks were also struck in the Donetsk region. Satellite images of the Saint Petersburg oil terminal have emerged following a strike by the Ukrainian Defense Forces. 6 storage tanks were damaged there and 1 was destroyed. Technical overpasses were also hit. A terrible disgrace for Putin. The defense forces showed that Russian air defenses can't even protect Saint Petersburg. And on the opening day of Putin's brainchild, the Saint Petersburg International Economic Forum. Though, frankly, the event itself in its current form is a disgrace.
The situation is under control.
There it is, 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 there it is.
That's it, it's going, it's going.
In St. Petersburg, security measures are exhaustive. New challenges have been fully taken into account.
They didn't hit it, they didn't hit it. It's gonna bang again. It'll bang again. Yes, 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 there it goes flying.
Guests of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum have nothing to worry about. This was Governor Beglov's official statement shortly before Ukrainian drones also decided to take part in the Russian forum.
A set of preliminary security measures has been completed within the established timeframe. New challenges have been fully taken into account.
Early Wednesday morning, Ukrainian drones also took all the new challenges into account, and the measures truly proved to be exhaustive. They were exhausted far too quickly. As a result, the outcome favored the drone sanctions. St. Petersburg lost, and as punishment, it got a fire at the St. Petersburg oil terminal, one of the largest oil refining complexes in northwestern Russia.
There is another spot over there where it is even going to blow up.
Besides the marine terminal, the Russians have lost another one of their ships. At the Kronstadt marine plant, the corvette Boykai was attacked, a vessel that the Russians have been using to escort tankers belonging to Russia's Shadow Fleet. To be fair, the St. Petersburg air defense crews worked their hearts out. You could even say they worked without putting their phones down.
Got the shot.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh, wow, it is still burning. Got it, got it, got it. Listen, film me in this and send me the video later.
The attack happened just hours before the opening of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, a key annual event for Russian business and the Kremlin. Besides the obvious fireworks, guests, including Putin's daughters, were met with a total information blackout. After the attack, the internet in St. Petersburg was completely cut off. Even the so-called whitelisted sites stopped working. Speaking of the forum guests, the Russians gathered the cream of Western cringe at the forum. Among the guests of honor were Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan. Andrew Tate is a former kickboxer and blogger accused of human trafficking and sexual harassment. He has claimed that women belong to men and that victims of sexual violence bear some responsibility for it. He also, for instance, openly talked about beating a woman and getting away with it. In December 2022, the Tate brothers were charged in Romania with human trafficking, sexual violence, and forming an organized crime group. They were banned from leaving the country until January 25, but then Romanian authorities suddenly lifted the restrictions. There were reports that the men are supported by the Trump administration. As for the brothers' visit to Moscow, they were greeted at the airport with bread and salt. Literally, and they even brought in a folk ensemble.
Break it. Welcome to life.
Even Z patriots were shocked by such guests, specifically a Z blogger close to the Russian Ministry of Defense, the Ryba.
His reputation in the media space among all sensible people is definitely... He's a scandal-ridden figure with criminal cases, a human trafficker, and a character banned by almost all major platforms. Any appearance of the Tates in the Russian media space is a blow to one's reputation. They don't need a podium because they use any platform for self-promotion, and associating with them will damage the image of those who invited them.
But Rybar approved of the next guest. We're talking about American activist Candace Owens. She hasn't been caught in human trafficking, but her reputation is quite interesting. Owens is known for spreading conspiracy theories that Brigitte Macron is a transgender woman and that Americans never went to the moon. At the Russian Forum, she has an important task to speak at a session on family values. The Russians also invited former US Marine and ex-UN inspector in Iraq Scott Ritter to the forum. In 2011, he was sentenced to 2.5 years for masturbating in a video chat with a police officer posing as a 15-year-old girl. Putin himself also promises to be at SPIF. The Russian dictator is scheduled to speak at the event on June 5th. At least that's what was stated before Robert Magyar Brovdi decided to perform at the forum with a bang. Now Putin's participation is in question.
The first strikes by Ukrainian ballistics on targets in Moscow are possible in the summer, at the latest in early autumn. This was stated by the chief designer of the Firepoint company, Denis Steilerman. He specified that we are talking about the FP9 missile, which is currently being refined and prepared for testing. The nature of Russian losses has changed over the past year. This was stated by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at a joint press conference with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. We will return to this press conference later. According to Zelenskyy, the RF is losing 30 to 35,000 military personnel every month. About 63% are killed and another 37% are seriously wounded. These are huge, irreversible losses. In the past 24 hours alone, Russia has lost at least 1,300 invaders killed and wounded. Thus, since the start of the full-scale invasion, it's already 1,369,340 occupiers. In addition, over the last 24 hours, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 4 Russian tanks, 3 armored fighting vehicles, 75 artillery systems, and dozens of other pieces of Russian military equipment. Ukraine has seized the initiative at the front. Analysts cautiously call the situation a turning point. More on this in the report.
The war is beginning to unfold not according to the Kremlin's scenario. The Russian offensive is stalling, Ukrainian strikes are getting deeper, and the initiative seems to be gradually slipping from Muscovy's hands.
Now they have started attacking us with massive missile strikes. The main reason why they did this is because they are losing on the battlefield. In a month, they failed to occupy more territory than they lost during that same month.
And things are so bad that even die-hard propagandists are talking about a turning point.
We have either exhausted or we are currently on the very verge of exhausting our offensive potential.
The enemy is consistently pushing through the defenses of Russian units, which had been on the offensive here since last year. As of right now, the Russian side risks losing all the progress it has achieved. A significant role is played by the superiority of Ukrainian formations in drones and trained operators.
The situation in the so-called middle rear is becoming especially painful for the Kremlin.
Cannon.
Where until recently the occupiers felt relatively safe, today Ukrainian drones are operating. Warehouses, command posts, logistics hubs, oil depots, and military-industrial complex facilities are under attack.
Right now, a turning point is happening on the front. They are no longer advancing anywhere and are even retreating in some places. And apparently, they no longer have enough resources.
The numbers say so too. In May, the armed forces of Ukraine began liberating more territory than Russia is able to capture.
They completely failed in May. This is the weakest growth of occupied territory since October 2023, when the enemy began a strategic offensive operation on most sectors of the front. According to our map, in May, the enemy occupied only 14 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. However, it should be understood that for security reasons, we show the progress of the Ukrainian Defense Forces with a delay. Therefore, without specifics, but we are ready to state, this is the first month in recent years since the 2023 counteroffensive when the growth of occupied territory for Russia has become negative.
And it seems that it's starting to come true. The Russian dictator's worst nightmare. The occupiers' main trophy, Crimea, could slip through their fingers.
And this is our land.
But he is confident for no reason, because at this very moment, the defense forces are consistently weakening key Russian positions. In the south, and even the most hardcore Zed supporters admit this. Propagandists complain about the destruction of air defense systems, constant strikes on military infrastructure, and the loss of control over the situation in the Black Sea.
In recent weeks, the land corridor to Crimea and transport links through it, including the Novorossiya highway, have been subjected to regular attacks by the armed forces of Ukraine. Due to disrupted logistics on the peninsula, there are supply interruptions and temporary restrictions on the sale of fuel, gasoline, and diesel. This tactic fits perfectly into the art of warfare. It is called isolation of the battlefield by cutting off enemy communications at a great depth. This is dangerous not only because of the lack of supplies to Crimea. It's dangerous because our troops will stop receiving necessary supplies, those holding the front line along the lower Dnieper, occupying the Kinburn Spit, and including those troops and forces that directly defend the Crimean Peninsula and the Black Sea coast. That is, indirectly, this may indicate the enemy's preparation for an offensive in this direction.
According to expert estimates, the AFU has effectively created a so-called 200-kilometer kill zone for Russian troops. This is a territory where any major logistics, warehouses, supply columns, and military facilities can come under attack from Ukrainian drones and long-range weapons.
There is no gasoline in Crimea. The few tourists are given these leaflets on how to properly hide from drones and missiles. There is fuel oil on the beaches. This is what Putin has turned Crimea into.
What is happening, analysts say, increasingly resembles the events of the fall of 2022 before the liberation of Kherson. When Ukraine did not rush into frontal attacks, but methodically destroyed the enemy's logistics, turning its grouping into an isolated enclave. Now a similar strategy is seen around the temporarily occupied Crimea.
And for Ukraine's victory, a victory is critically necessary. For the victorious end of the war in Ukraine, a victory in Crimea is necessary. That is, to block as many Russian soldiers as possible in Crimea, leave them without supplies, turn them, let's say from a regular army, which they basically are not, even the UN said so, into a completely frantic gang of marauders who will lose any semblance of discipline and organization. Basically, that is our task. Because the destruction of the enemy's combat potential is not always, I would put it this way, not necessarily linked to the physical destruction of the enemy's combat units.
And it seems that very soon, perhaps even sooner than expected, rather than the much discussed and widely anticipated next offensive from the Russian Federation, their soldiers face a difficult and painful retreat.
It's high time to subscribe to the channel, like this video and share it. Please do it right now. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. Ukraine is trumping another of the Kremlin's cards, namely the military budget. It has grown significantly thanks to aid from Europe. Next, about specific figures and possible consequences.
For a long time, money remained one of the Kremlin's main arguments in this war. Russia could afford to increase military spending, relying on significantly larger financial resources. But now, this balance is starting to shift.
Statistical data shows that for 2 months in a row now, economic momentum has unfortunately been declining.
Thanks to the help of European partners, Ukrainian defense spending could rise to record levels and almost match that of Russia. The European Union has unlocked a financial support package for Ukraine worth 90 billion euros over 2 years. While in previous years the gap between the Ukrainian and Russian military budgets was massive, now we're looking at nearly comparable levels of funding.
The budget, Ukraine's military budget, it's slowly, it's not catching up to Russia's, but then Russia is huge. But at the very least, you can't say that these are incomparable figures. After all, we are closing in on them, that's the first thing. And second, the efficiency of use. What many are talking about now is how much Ukraine is, let's say, directing the resources it has into more effective areas, primarily drones.
And in terms of numbers, in 2026, Ukraine's defense spending, including aid, could reach about $140 to $150 billion. Russia's is around 130 to 180 billion, depending on the exchange rate and budget execution. So the gap is no longer several times over, as it was before.
First, I emphasize the efficiency of how Ukraine uses its funds. Second, the very fact that Russia, which started this war from a position of being powerful, strong, the second army in the world, and that will achieve everything quickly, is now increasingly asking, can we actually achieve all this? And in Russia, voices are rising everywhere. And not just, in street dives, but in parliaments. Yes, maybe not the State Duma, but a bit lower. Though even in the Duma, such voices are appearing saying the war must end urgently because it's not going the way Russia wants.
At the same time, Russia itself is facing growing economic problems. The budget deficit is growing, and the authorities are increasingly discussing cutting certain civilian programs to maintain military spending.
Now, Russia is forced to think about what it will have to sacrifice. When you sacrifice something, you get the feeling that the country isn't functioning the way it should. And now even the Financial Times has written about a $27 billion shortfall for military needs. Meaning even for the military needs they'd like to meet, there's no money. What will this lead to? To the fact that orders will be placed that won't be paid for. This is already happening now. But the question is, will those fulfilling these orders work for free?
Financial capabilities directly affect a country's ability to wage a long war. But the question arises, are Ukraine's allies capable of maintaining current levels of support in the future?
In Europe, at least, they are very good at calculating the situation ahead, and they also have an excellent historical memory. All these stories from Russia, that soon Europe will stop helping, that the money will run out. Well, look, Europe is now giving us 90 billion over 2 years. For Europe, it's important that Ukraine has the resources to hold on. Because as long as Ukraine holds on, as long as there's a risk from Russia, Europe will always think about the fact that it could have problems.
The war has long since become not just a confrontation of armies, but also a competition of economies. And if Russia's financial advantage is indeed shrinking, this could have consequences far beyond budget statistics.
And when you don't have enough financial resources to pay these soldiers, then get ready for the moment when these soldiers will want to come to you and ask, where's the money? Since you used to pay and now you don't, it means this money is somewhere with you. Stored away, you don't want to give it? Well, then we'll take it by force. And jokes aside, it's quite possible that the war Russia started against Ukraine will end in a civil war in Russia.
Until recently, financial capabilities were considered one of the Kremlin's key advantages. Today, Ukraine is gradually closing this gap thanks to Europe's support. While Russia tries to maintain its current level of spending, Ukraine receives additional resources to strengthen its own defense.
Supplies of missiles for Ukrainian air defense systems continue, and allies are ready to further fund the relevant programs. This was reported by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at a joint press conference with President Zelenskyy in Kiev. According to Rutte, the North Atlantic Alliance is working on replenishing stockpiles in Europe and the United States. The NATO Secretary General added that Ukraine, together with European partners and alliance allies, is already implementing new approaches to strengthen air defense. Ukraine is pushing Europe as much as possible to work on its own anti-ballistic system. This was reported by President Zelenskyy. According to him, it's necessary for Europe to have its own systems, its own missiles for protection, and the possibility to create an anti-ballistic system in Europe also exists. It's necessary for political decisions to be made as quickly as possible. Hungary has lifted its 17-month veto on Ukraine and Moldova's accession to the European Union. This is reported by the Financial Times. The start of the first negotiation cluster is expected as early as June 15th. Earlier, Hungarian Prime Minister Peter Magyar reported that Kiev and Budapest had reached an agreement regarding the expansion of linguistic, educational, cultural, and political rights of the Hungarian community in Ukraine. A dirty past. The detention of armored car guards from the Ukrainian Sberbank in Hungary, along with money and gold, happened on Orban's orders. This is reported by the Hungarian publication Telex. According to its sources, the decision on this special operation was made at the highest level, due to the political conflicts surrounding the Druzhba oil pipeline. Finally, about the jar of spiders called Russia. The head of the so-called Safe Internet League, Ekaterina Mizulina, filed a report against Ksenia Sobchak because in one of her interviews, Mizulina saw propaganda for the extremist LGBT movement. Details follow.
A new episode of the war within the Russian media space began with a single interview.
I can't say, like, I'm a guy or I'm a woman. Well, no, I'm just me, and that's it. I'm something between a drag queen and those people who change their gender. I just like looking feminine. I like taking care of myself. I like long hair. I like high quality makeup. I like everything related to femininity.
The head of the Safe Internet League, Ekaterina Mizulina, asked the Ministry of Internal Affairs to investigate an interview by Ksenia Sobchak with blogger Igor Sinyak for so-called LGBT propaganda. The interview was released on Sobchak's channel on June 1st, and within hours it sparked another public scandal.
People who are, like me, they fashionably call themselves non-binary, but I don't want to get into this terminology. I don't consider myself that.
According to Mizulina, the video contains signs of violating Russian law. She was particularly outraged that the video was published on Children's Day. In her statement, she called the episode a provocation and said she sent the materials to the Ministry of Internal Affairs for review.
Why don't you post an interview with the relatives of those killed in Starobelsk on Children's Day? And talk about the tragedy that the whole country is mourning. Instead, you focus on trash content with a man in a skirt? Why constantly focus on trash content and provoke everyone?
Igor Sinyak himself is one of the most famous beauty bloggers on Russian-speaking YouTube. Lately, he's lived in France, known for his striking look.
I'm not a woman.
Experiments with his look and candid statements about his own life. It was his appearance and the topics of conversation that apparently caused Mizulina's complaints.
What should stay in the minds of children who see this interview in their recommendations, whether they want to or not? That it's supposedly normal for a man to wear a dress and then, as it turns out, in that form, also rape children, as happened in primary.
But the most interesting part began after Sobchak herself responded to the accusations. The pseudo-journalist stated there's no propaganda in the interview and it's just a conversation with a person who looks how they see fit. According to Sobchak, her team didn't violate a single legal norm. She also accused Mizulina of hiding behind concern for children to promote her own ideological views.
There is a clear law and it was not violated by us. There is no propaganda of anything or calls to action in the video. But there is a conversation with a person just like us who simply looks the way they like. Just admit your homophobia. Because I talk to people from all over Russia, from cities and remote villages, and I see that they aren't homophobic, but the officials are.
At first glance, it might seem like just another dispute over yet another YouTube video. But in reality, this story is much more telling. Because just a few years ago, the main targets of such investigations were obscure bloggers, musicians, or streamers. Now, Ksenia Sobchak herself is under fire. A person with a huge audience, connections, and influence who has long been part of Russia's public, so-called elite. In fact, we are witnessing a curious transformation of the system of public denunciations and investigations. For a long time, this mechanism was directed against people outside the political and media establishment. But gradually, the circle of suspects is expanding so much that it's starting to include members of the elite themselves. When a system is built on an endless search for violators, sooner or later it starts looking for them within its own circle. And then the famous jar of spiders ceases to be a metaphor.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Strength to the Ukrainian defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share this video. And see you soon.